The relentless hum of high-performance servers was the only music Han Soo-min knew. It was the soundtrack to her life, a steady, predictable drone that promised order and logic. At 25, she was the newest and arguably the most hopeful junior engineer at Jinsil Tech, a titan in the world of architectural engineering and smart city design. Her world was one of clean lines, precise calculations, and the unwavering belief that every problem had a solution waiting to be found in a well-written algorithm or a perfectly rendered blueprint. The chaos of human emotion was a variable she had always found easiest to ignore, a messy bit of code that corrupted otherwise elegant systems. She moved through the sleek, minimalist office like a ghost in a machine, her presence defined only by the quality of her work, which was, even her detractors had to admit, impeccable. Her desk was a fortress of solitude, piled high with textbooks and technical manuals, a stark contrast to the trendy, personalized spaces of her colleagues. Soo-min clutched her tablet, its screen displaying the schematics for the HVAC system of the new Elysian Tower project, a marvel of sustainable architecture that was Jinsil Tech's crown jewel. It was her first major assignment, and she had spent the last 72 hours fueled by instant coffee and a burning desire to prove herself. She saw beauty not in the soaring glass facade of the building, but in the elegant efficiency of its circulatory system, the hidden network of ducts and pipes that would give it life. To her, this was poetry. She was so engrossed in tracing the flow of recycled air that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching, sharp and commanding, each click of expensive leather on polished concrete echoing with an authority that made others in the open-plan office instinctively sit up straighter. Only when a shadow fell over her screen did she finally look up, her eyes meeting a gaze as cold and unyielding as the winter sky over the Han River.
Kang Ji-won was not a man, he was a concept. The CEO of Jinsil Tech. At 35, he had inherited the company from his father and, through a ruthless combination of innovation and corporate rating, had tripled its value. He moved with a chilling economy of motion, his bespoke suits tailored to perfection, his face a mask of aristocratic indifference. He was the kind of man who didn't speak when a glare would suffice, and his glares were legendary. He was currently directing one of his most potent ones at Soo-min. "Report," he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. It wasn't a request. It was a command packet being sent over the network. Soo-min blinked, her mind scrambling to switch from the language of code to the language of humans. She fumbled to stand, nearly knocking over a stack of manuals. "Sir, the simulations for the thermal regulation system are complete. I've optimized the airflow algorithm to reduce energy consumption by an additional 4.7% beyond the project's initial targets," she recited, her voice more steady than she felt. Ji-won's eyes narrowed, scanning the complex diagrams on her tablet. He took the device from her hands without asking, his long fingers manipulating the screen with a practiced ease. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Soo-min held her breath, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on them. The CEO was a rare sight on the main engineering floor, and his presence usually heralded a firing or a public humiliation. He hummed, a non-committal sound that could mean anything from approval to utter contempt. "The load calculation for the west-facing atrium seems optimistic," he stated, tapping a section of the blueprint. "Run it again. Factor in a 15% increase in solar radiation during peak summer months. I want it on my desk by morning." He placed the tablet back on her desk with a decisive click and walked away, leaving a vortex of silence in his wake. Soo-min stared at the screen, her heart sinking. A 15% increase? That would undo all her work. It was an impossible, arbitrary demand. As the collective tension in the office began to dissipate, a warm, reassuring voice spoke beside her. "Don't let him get to you. That's just his way of saying good job, but I'm still the boss." Soo-min turned to see Lee Do-hyun, a senior engineer and the unofficial big brother of the department. With his easy smile, perpetually rumpled shirt, and a coffee mug that had seen better days, Do-hyun was the antithesis of Kang Ji-won. He was the human element in the Jinsil machine, the one who remembered birthdays, organized team dinners, and knew how to coax the finicky, industrial-grade coffee maker back to life. He was patient, kind, and universally liked. He leaned against her desk, radiating a calm that Soo-min found herself desperately needing. "He's right, though," Do-hyun said softly, pointing at the same spot Ji-won had indicated. "The standard models don't always account for the urban heat island effect here in Seoul. He's not just being difficult, he's pushing you to be better." Soo-min felt a flush of embarrassment. Of course, the heat island effect. It was a rookie mistake to overlook it. "Thank you, Sunbaenin," she mumbled, bowing her head slightly. Do-hyun just chuckled, ruffling his own hair. "Hey, we've all been there. Come on, I'll buy you a real coffee, not that sludge from the machine. You look like you're about to fall over." He gently took the tablet from her, his touch the complete opposite of the CEO's, warm and hesitant. He scanned the schematics with a quick, appreciative eye. "This is brilliant work, Soo-min-si. You have a rare talent for seeing in the whole system, not just the parts." Ji-won, CEO Kang, sees it too, even if he'd rather die than admit it. Soo-min looked up at him, surprised. For the first time that day, a genuine, shy smile touched her lips. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her place here after all. The days bled into weeks, settling into a new kind of normal. This normal consisted of Soo-min working with a singular, almost monastic focus, her world shrinking to the confines of her cubicle and the Elysian Tower project. It was a world punctuated by the jarring intrusions of CEO Kang Ji-won, who would appear without warning to critique her work with a brutal, infuriating precision that, she had to begrudgingly admit, always made it better. He never offered a word of praise, only a curt nod or another impossible challenge. Yet she found herself anticipating his appearances, a strange knot of dread and excitement tightening in her stomach whenever she saw his silhouette approaching. He was a puzzle, a black box whose internal logic she couldn't decipher, and the engineer in her was captivated by the challenge. She started leaving complex design problems open on her screen, just to see if he would take the bait and solve them. He always did. Balancing Ji-won's cold critiques was Do-hyun's constant warmth. He became her mentor, her confidant, her only real friend in the sterile corporate environment. He would bring her food when she worked late, patiently explaining the complex office politics she failed to notice. He translated the CEO's cryptic demands into actionable feedback and defended her work in team meetings when she was too timid to speak for herself. He told her stories about the company before Ji-won took over, painting a picture of a more familial place under the leadership of the old Chairman Kang. Ji-won had a tough time after his father passed away, Do-hyun explained one evening over tteokbokki at a small stall near the office. He had to grow up fast, make some hard choices. He built this empire, but I think he lost something along the way. Soo-min listened, absorbing this new data point, trying to fit it into the algorithm of the man she knew. There was an unspoken rhythm to their interactions. Ji-won was the storm, pushing her to her limits, forcing her to innovate and grow stronger. Do-hyun was the harbor, offering refuge and support, helping her rebuild after the tempest passed. She found herself caught between two opposing forces, a planetoid trapped in the gravitational pull of two vastly different suns. One burned with a cold, distant light, the other with a gentle, steady warmth. She respected Ji-won's mind, his almost clairvoyant ability to see the future of technology. But she was comfortable with Do-hyun. He felt safe, familiar. She didn't realize that she was beginning to rely on both of them, not just for her work, but for something more. Her carefully ordered world was developing a new, unwritten blueprint, one designed not by logic, but by the chaotic pull of human connection. The foundation was laid, the characters placed on the board, living out their normal lives, unaware of the structural flaw hidden deep within the bedrock.
One rainy Tuesday, the three of them found themselves the last ones in the office. A critical server had failed, threatening to set the Elysian project back by a week. Soo-min was frantically writing a patch, her fingers flying across the keyboard, while Do-hyun was on the phone, calmly coordinating with the off-site IT team. Unexpectedly, Ji-won was there too, not observing from a distance, but with his sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened, peering into the server rack with an intense focus. "It's not a software failure," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. "It's the power supply unit. It's overheating." He pointed to a small, blinking red light that everyone else had missed. Soo-min and Do-hyun exchanged a look of surprise. The CEO, the man of finance and strategy, was a hardware geek. For a brief moment, the mask slipped. Working together, they managed to rig a temporary cooling system and restore the server. In the quiet aftermath, a strange sense of camaraderie filled the room. Ji-won, for the first time, looked at Soo-min and gave her a simple, "Good work." The two words landed with the force of a Shakespearean sonnet. Do-hyun smiled, a proud, happy smile, and suggested they all go for a late dinner. To Soo-min's astonishment, Ji-won agreed. The dinner was an awkward affair. Ji-won was still reserved, but he listened as Do-hyun and Soo-min talked, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes when he looked at her. As they parted ways in the rain, Do-hyun held an umbrella over her head, while Ji-won stood a few feet away, watching them under the stark glow of a streetlight, before turning and disappearing into the night in his black sedan. Soo-min watched him go, then looked at Do-hyun's kind face, a sense of profound confusion washing over her. The introduction was complete. Her baseline reality was established, a delicate equilibrium of professional respect and budding friendship. But the stable ground she stood on was about to prove far more precarious than she could ever imagine. The Elysian Tower project, once just a collection of schematics on Soo-min's tablet, began to rise from the ground, a skeleton of steel and concrete reaching for the Seoul sky. With the promotion of the project to its critical second phase, a special task force was created, an elite team designed to handle the tower's revolutionary and highly problematic integrated smart grid system. To Soo-min's shock and the entire department's envy, CEO Kang Ji-won personally assigned her to the team. And to no one's surprise, the team was to be led by the reliable and experienced Lee Do-hyun. But there was a catch. Citing the project's unprecedented importance, Ji-won announced he would be personally overseeing the task force, embedding himself within their daily operations. The small, insulated world Soo-min had built for herself was shattered. Her life was now a triangle, forced into a professional proximity that was becoming increasingly and dangerously personal. The task force office was a glass-walled enclosure in the executive floor, a fishbowl where their every success and failure would be on display. The dynamic established itself quickly. Do-hyun was the planner, the strategist. He would break down the monumental task of designing the tower's nervous system into manageable parts, assigning tasks with a cheerful efficiency and always taking the time to explain the why behind the what. He and Soo-min would spend hours huddled over a single console, their heads close together as they debated the merits of different capacitor models or the most efficient data routing protocols. In these moments, Soo-min felt a deep sense of partnership. Do-hyun valued her input, celebrated her small victories, and treated her as an equal, a colleague whose mind he genuinely admired. He made the immense pressure of the project feel manageable, even fun. Kang Ji-won, on the other hand, was the chaos factor. He didn't manage, he stress-tested. He would materialize in the room, silent and imposing, and watch them work for long stretches. Then he would lob a grenade of a question that would expose a hidden flaw in their logic. "Your power distribution model is efficient," he stated one afternoon, not looking up from his own monitor, "but it's brittle. What happens if the substation on the 45th floor is compromised in a fire? Your entire grid fails sequentially. It's a house of cards." He never offered the solution,
only the problem. It was infuriating. And yet, after hours of frantic redesigning, when Soo-min finally devised a decentralized, redundant power network inspired by the biology of mycelial networks, the look of grudging respect in Ji-won's eyes was a more potent reward than any verbal praise Do-hyun could offer.
The long hours bled together, fueled by takeout jjajangmyeon and lukewarm canned coffee. In this crucible of stress and exhaustion, the professional boundaries began to blur. Soo-min started to see cracks in both men's facades. She discovered that Do-hyun, despite his easygoing nature, carried a picture of his ailing mother in his wallet, and that his cheerfulness was sometimes a shield for a deep-seated anxiety about her health. He would take quiet, worried phone calls, his smile vanishing the moment he thought no one was looking. He confided in Soo-min about the mounting hospital bills, the fear of losing the one person who had always believed in him. She found herself wanting to protect him, to ease his burden in any way she could. His vulnerability made him more real, more human, and her heart ached for him. Then there was Ji-won. She learned to read his moods not from his words, but from the tension in his jaw or the way he massaged his temples when he was deep in thought. One night, she found him asleep at his desk, his head resting on his arms, the mask of the ruthless CEO gone. In its place was a face that looked unguarded, almost boyish, and deeply lonely. A half-finished schematic for a small, simple house was on his screen, a stark contrast to the grand skyscraper they were building. Instinctively, she draped her own cardigan over his shoulders. She was halfway back to her desk when his voice, thick with sleep, stopped her. "Thank you." He didn't look up, but the words were soft, devoid of their usual Arctic chill. A strange warmth bloomed in Soo-min's chest, an anomaly she couldn't explain. The development of their relationships mirrored the construction of the tower. Her bond with Do-hyun was like the foundation, solid, supportive, built day by day with shared laughter and mutual respect. He was the one she turned to for comfort. When her own experimental cooling system for the server room failed a simulation, sending her into a spiral of self-doubt, it was Do-hyun who stayed with her all night, talking her through the problem until she found the error, his belief in her unwavering. He was her safe harbor, the predictable, stable element in her increasingly chaotic life. Her feelings for him were clear, logical, and easy to categorize. Deep affection, gratitude, and a growing romantic fondness. It was a well-designed system, one she understood. Her connection with Ji-won was the opposite. It was the volatile, high-voltage core of the tower, unpredictable and dangerous, yet essential. He continued to push her, his expectations bordering on unreasonable. Yet she found herself rising to meet them every time. He didn't comfort her. He challenged her to be better than she thought she could be. The tension between them was a taut wire, humming with an unspoken energy. He started to show her glimmers of the man beneath the CEO. He had a surprising knowledge of classical music, which she discovered when he identified a Vivaldi piece she was humming under her breath. He had a dry, almost imperceptible wit that would surface in a rare, sarcastic comment that was so unexpected it made her laugh out loud, earning her a startled but not entirely displeased look from him. This growing complexity culminated around the project's midpoint, the equivalent of the K-drama's 8th episode. The team was celebrating a major breakthrough, the successful simulation of the entire smart grid. Do-hyun had organized a small team dinner at a barbecue restaurant. Ji-won, surprisingly, came along. The mood was light, celebratory. Fueled by a little too much soju, Soo-min found the courage to thank Ji-won directly. "Thank you for pushing me, CEO Nim. I wouldn't have been able to do it without your difficult questions." Do-hyun laughed, clapping Ji-won on the back. "See, she gets you." Ji-won didn't respond, but he looked at Soo-min, his gaze intense, holding hers for a moment too long. Later that night, as Do-hyun walked her to the subway station, he confessed. "Soo-min-si," he started, his usual confidence faltering. "I really like you, not just as a colleague." His words were sweet,
sincere, and everything a girl was supposed to want to hear. Soo-min's heart fluttered. This was the logical conclusion, the path of least resistance. She liked him too. But as she was about to respond, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It contained only a single, cryptic line of code. It wasn't a language she recognized, but it had a strange, elegant syntax. Confused, she looked up, just as a black car pulled up to the curb. The back window rolled down, revealing Kang Ji-won. "Get in," he commanded, his voice tight. "There's something you need to see." His expression was dark, urgent. Do-hyun stepped forward protectively. "CEO Nim, it's late!" But Ji-won's eyes were locked on Soo-min. Against her better judgment, against all logic, she felt compelled. She hesitated, looked at Do-hyun's hopeful, confused face, and then made a choice. She got in the car. Ji-won didn't speak as the car sped through the city. He took her to the Jinsil Tech archives, a temperature-controlled vault in the building's sub-basement. He pulled out a dusty old box labeled Project Nightingale. Inside were hand-drawn blueprints, old photographs, and engineering notes. The designs were for a state-of-the-art hospital wing. They were brilliant, innovative, and strangely familiar. The handwriting was elegant, precise. "My father didn't just build this company," Ji-won said, his voice rough with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "He was an engineer, a brilliant one." He handed her a photograph. It showed a younger Chairman Kang standing with another man, both of them beaming, their arms around each other's shoulders, and standing between them, a small girl with bright, intelligent eyes clutching a toy robot. Soo-min's breath hitched. The man next to Chairman Kang was her father, and the little girl was her. "Your father and mine were partners," Ji-won explained, his voice low. "They were the heart of Jinsil Tech. Project Nightingale was their dream." He pointed to a flaw in the old blueprint, a critical miscalculation in the structural support for an oxygen storage facility. "There was an accident, a fire. My father survived. Yours didn't." The world tilted on its axis. The neatly organized files of her life were corrupted in an instant. Her father's death, which she had always been told was a simple car crash, was a lie. He was an engineer, a brilliant one, and he had died here in a place connected to this company, to this man. Ji-won watched her, his face a mixture of pain and something else, guilt. "The code I sent you," he said softly, "it was a private messaging system your father and I created when I was a boy. It was our secret." He had never forgotten her. This entire time, his coldness, his pushing, it wasn't just about the work. It was about her. It was a test, a penance. The kiss, the confession, it was all happening at once. Do-hyun's simple, heartfelt words echoed in her mind, a beacon of normalcy and a tidal wave of revelation. But here, in the cold, quiet vault, Ji-won had just handed her the key to her entire life. He hadn't confessed his feelings with words. He had confessed with the truth. The revelation in the archive shattered Soo-min's reality. Her life, which she had believed to be a straightforward narrative of a hard-working orphan achieving her dreams, was suddenly a complex, layered mystery. Her father wasn't just a faceless victim of a random accident. He was a founding genius of Jinsil Tech, a partner, a friend to the great Chairman Kang. And his death was a dark secret buried in the company's foundations. She returned to her small apartment in a daze. The image of the old photograph burned into her mind. Ji-won's confession, delivered not with words of love, but with the weight of a shared, tragic past, had completely recontextualized their entire relationship. His harsh critiques, his impossible standards, his silent observations. It was all a dialogue she hadn't been able to hear. He wasn't just testing a junior engineer, he was searching for the ghost of his mentor in the eyes of his daughter.
Meanwhile, Do-hyun's simple, heartfelt confession hung in the air, a path not taken. He called and texted, his messages filled with a gentle concern that now felt like it belonged to a different lifetime.
How could she explain that the world had shifted beneath her feet? How could she talk about liking him back when she had just discovered that the CEO she feared and respected was inextricably linked to her own forgotten history? She felt a profound sense of dissonance. Her heart, which had been leaning towards Do-hyun's warmth and stability, was now pulled by the gravitational force of Ji-won's tragic, silent vigil. The story was no longer a simple romance. It was a melodrama, a mystery, and she was at its epicenter. The choice was no longer between two men, it was between two different versions of her own life. The atmosphere in the task force office became unbearably tense. Soo-min tried to act normal, but the new knowledge colored every interaction. She saw the ghost of her father in Ji-won's intense focus, in the way he sketched out ideas with a familiar, elegant precision. He, in turn, treated her with a new, guarded softness. The critiques were still there, but they were now framed as questions, as collaborative explorations. It was a silent acknowledgement of their new reality. Do-hyun, however, could only see the change, not the reason for it. He saw the new, unspoken understanding between Soo-min and the CEO, and a flicker of insecurity appeared behind his kind eyes. He tried to bridge the gap, bringing her favorite coffee, offering to help with her workload. But his kindness now had to compete with the pull of a 20-year-old mystery. This is where the true Janjun, the unexpected twist, enters the narrative. It wasn't the revelation of the past that was the turn. That was merely the setup. The twist came from a place no one, not even Ji-won, could have anticipated. Driven by a need to understand, Soo-min began her own quiet investigation. Using the coding language Ji-won had reminded her of, she started exploring Jinseal's oldest, forgotten server archives. She was looking for files related to Project Nightingale, anything that could tell her more about her father. Most of the data was corrupted or locked behind encryption so old it was nearly indecipherable. But she was her father's daughter. She found a backdoor, a small debugging script left behind by a young programmer. And there, in a dusty corner of the digital vault, she found it. A series of encrypted emails, not between her father and Chairman Kang, but between Chairman Kang and Do-hyun's mother.
The emails were dated from the year after the fire. They were formal, cold, but their content was explosive. They detailed regular payments from Chairman Kang's personal account to Do-hyun's mother. It was a trust fund, a settlement, hush money. But why? The final email contained a scanned document. It was a birth certificate. Lee Do-hyun. Mother's name listed, father's name, Kang Min-yoon. Chairman Kang. The kind, warm, supportive Lee Do-hyun, the man who spoke of the old chairman with such nostalgic reverence, was his illegitimate son. He was Kang Ji-won's half-brother. The blood drained from Soo-min's face. This wasn't just a secret, it was a motive. Do-hyun's entire persona, his big brother role, his gentle support, his stories of the good old days under the former chairman, it was all cast in a sinister new light. Suddenly, small, insignificant details began to click into place. Do-hyun's encyclopedic knowledge of the company's early days, his uncanny ability to be in the right place at the right time, the way he subtly guided conversations and meetings, often planting ideas that would later cause minor, almost imperceptible setbacks for Ji-won's key initiatives. His anxiety over his mother's health. Was it just about money? Or was it about the secret she held? Was his kindness a personality trait or a perfectly crafted mask? Was his pursuit of Soo-min genuine affection or a calculated move to get closer to the legacy of the other founding partner? Another piece on a chessboard Ji-won didn't even know he was playing on. The man who represented safety and stability was now the single greatest source of uncertainty and danger. The story wasn't a love triangle. It was a war of succession.
Soo-min felt sick. She now stood on a precipice, holding a truth that could destroy both men and possibly the company itself. Her first instinct was to go to Ji-won, but she hesitated. He was already carrying the weight of his father's and her father's legacy. How could she add the burden of a brother he never knew he had? A brother who was potentially plotting against him? Then she thought of Do-hyun. Was he a villain? Or was he just another victim of the older generation's secrets? A man denied his birthright, fighting for what he believed was his. She remembered the genuine worry in his eyes when he spoke of his mother, the pride he took in his work. The human brain, she knew, was not a binary system. It could hold conflicting truths at once. A man could be kind and treacherous, gentle and ambitious.
She decided to confront Do-hyun, but not directly. She needed more data. She started observing him, not as a friend, but as an engineer analyzing a compromised system. She noticed how he subtly manipulated team members, using his popularity to sow seeds of doubt about Ji-won's leadership. She saw him in a hushed, tense conversation with one of the company's board members, a man known for his opposition to Ji-won's aggressive expansion strategies. The evidence was compiling, creating a damning portrait of a quiet, patient coup. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a critical stress test of the Elysian Tower's emergency systems. A mysterious glitch, a single line of malicious code buried deep within the firmware of the HVAC system she had designed, caused a cascade failure. It was subtle, brilliant, and nearly untraceable.
The failure was a modified version of an algorithm she had shown only one other person in its early stages, asking for advice on its optimization, Do-hyun. He had planted the bug himself, a ticking time bomb set to detonate at the most critical juncture, designed to humiliate Ji-won and make him appear incompetent before the board and investors. The attack wasn't just on the company, it was personal. It was aimed at Ji-won, using Soo-min's own work as the weapon. That night, Soo-min found Do-hyun working late, a familiar sight, but this time she saw it for what it was. Not diligence, but surveillance. She walked up to his desk and placed a printed copy of his birth certificate on his keyboard. She didn't have to say a word.
Do-hyun looked at the paper and then up at her. The warm, friendly smile, the smile that had been her anchor for months, vanished. It didn't just fade, it was surgically removed, leaving behind something cold, calculating, and weary. The mask was off. "How did you find this?" he asked, his voice flat, stripped of its practiced warmth. It was the voice of a stranger. "You used me," Soo-min said, her own voice shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "The Elysian Tower? My designs? All of it?" Do-hyun leaned back in his chair, a sigh escaping his lips. He looked not like a villain caught in the act, but like a runner who had finally finished a marathon he never wanted to start. "He has everything," Do-hyun said quietly. A lifetime of resentment in those 3 words. The name, the company, the inheritance. He grew up in a palace while my mother and I were ghosts. He gets to be the brilliant CEO, and I have to be the nice guy, senior engineer, smiling and bowing and cleaning up his musses. Is that fair?
He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the raw pain behind the deception. "And then you showed up," he continued, his voice softer now. "The daughter of the other genius, a living piece of this company's history. At first, yes, you were a means to an end, a way to get closer to the core of it all." He paused, a flicker of genuine conflict in his eyes. "But it became complicated. I came to admire you, Soo-min-si. I truly did. That part wasn't a lie. The twist was complete. The friendly second lead was not just a rival for her affection, but the secret, illegitimate heir and the primary antagonist. The central conflict was no longer about which man she would choose, but about legacy, betrayal, and a battle for the soul of Jinseal Tech, with her and her father's legacy caught squarely in the crossfire.
The lighthearted romance had officially died, replaced by a high-stakes corporate thriller fueled by decades of secrets and lies.
The confrontation with Do-hyun left the air in the office thick with unspoken truths. The Gyul, the final act, was not about choosing a man, but about navigating the wreckage. Soo-min was now the unwilling keeper of a secret that could shatter the fragile peace of Jinsil Tech. Do-hyun's confession, a cocktail of raw resentment and twisted affection, left her feeling hollow. He wasn't a simple villain. He was a product of the secrets and lies of the previous generation, a mirror image of Ji-won, shaped by absence rather than presence. The final act became a frantic race against time. Do-hyun was poised to use the flaw he had planted in the Elysian Towers system during the upcoming final presentation to the International Consortium of Investors, a public move designed to trigger a no-confidence vote against Ji-won. Soo-min was the only one who knew the exact nature of the sabotage and the identity of its architect.
Her loyalty was torn. Exposing Do-hyun meant destroying the man who, despite his deception, had been her only friend and mentor. It meant revealing the Kang family's dirtiest laundry to the world, potentially harming the company her own father helped build. Staying silent meant allowing Ji-won, a man who was silently carrying the weight of his own father's guilt, to be publicly humiliated and ousted by a brother he didn't know existed. It would be the ultimate betrayal of the legacy Ji-won had tried so hard to protect, a legacy that was also hers. She chose a third option, the engineer's option. She would not expose the problem, she would fix it. She locked herself in her apartment for 48 hours, reverse engineering the malicious code, creating a patch that could neutralize the attack without revealing its existence. It was a near impossible task, a digital surgery on the building's very soul.
As she worked, Ji-won, sensing her distress and withdrawal, came to her apartment. He didn't demand answers. He simply stood at the door, holding bags of groceries. "You haven't eaten," he stated, a simple observation that carried the weight of deep concern. He came in, quietly cleaned her messy living room, and made her a simple meal, just as she had once draped her cardigan over him. It was in these quiet moments that their bond solidified. He didn't need to know the details of the threat. He just needed to know that she was at the center of it, and his instinct was to protect her. "My father was a great engineer," Ji-won said, breaking the silence, "but he was a flawed man. He made choices that hurt people. I've spent my life trying to build something strong enough to withstand the cracks in his foundation." Soo-min looked at him and realized he wasn't just talking about the company. He was talking about family, about Do-hyun. He suspected something was wrong, even if he didn't know the specifics. On the day of the presentation, the tension was palpable. The auditorium was filled with investors and press. Ji-won was on stage, presenting the Elysian Tower with a calm, confident demeanor. Do-hyun stood in the back of the room, a tablet in his hand, his expression unreadable. He gave Soo-min a final, questioning look. It was a silent plea and a threat. As Ji-won reached the part of the presentation focusing on the integrated security and climate systems, Do-hyun's thumb hovered over the command to execute the attack. At that exact moment, Soo-min, from a terminal in the control room, deployed her patch. On the main screen, the system diagnostics, which should have cascaded into red alerts, flickered for a fraction of a second and then held steady, green across the board. The system was stable. Soo-min had rewritten the blueprint at the last possible second. Do-hyun stared at his tablet, his face a mask of disbelief. The attack had failed. He looked from the screen to Soo-min, who met his gaze with a steady, sorrowful look. It was over. Ji-won, unaware of the digital duel that had just taken place, concluded his presentation to thunderous applause. The project was a success. Later, in the empty auditorium, the three of them stood in a final, tense triangle. "It was you, wasn't it?" Ji-won asked Do-hyun, his voice quiet. He had figured it out. Not the sabotage, but the resentment,
The ambition, he had seen the look on Do-hyun's face when the system held. Soo-min finally spoke, laying the truth bare. He's your brother, Ji-won SC. She revealed everything. The birth certificate, the secret payments, the lifetime of being an outsider.
The aftermath was not an explosion, but a quiet, painful implosion. There were no dramatic firings or public accusations. Do-hyun resigned, disappearing from the company as quietly as he had operated within it. In a final private meeting, Ji-won handed him a significant portion of his own personal shares in Jinsil Tech. "It's not the company," Ji-won said. "It's from our father. It's what you were owed." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a form of justice, a reconciliation of the past. It was an acknowledgement of their shared, broken legacy. Do-hyun accepted it, the first step in building a life outside the shadow of the man he once resented. Their relationship would never be simple, but the war was over.
Months passed. The Elysian Tower was completed, its lights a new star in the Seoul skyline. Soo-min was promoted to head of the R&D department, no longer a rookie, but a respected innovator in her own right. She had found her place, not by following a blueprint, but by drawing her own. The conclusion of her romantic journey was as quiet and steady as the resolution of the corporate drama. There was no grand public confession. Instead, there was Ji-won, waiting for her after work, holding 2 cups of coffee. There was a shared silence that was no longer awkward, but comfortable. There were visits to her father's grave, where Ji-won would stand beside her, a silent partner in her grief and her memory.
In the final scene, they are standing on the observation deck of the Elysian Tower, looking out over the sprawling city. The world below is a complex network of lights and life, a system they both understand. "My father and yours," Soo-min said softly. "They wanted to build the future." Ji-won looked at her, and for the first time, a genuine, unguarded smile reached his eyes. "We did," he replied. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. The scars of the past remained. Do-hyun was out in the world, starting over, a ghost of what might have been. The memory of the betrayal still lingered, but it was a real ending, a harmonious one. The dissonance created by the Jean, the revelation of Do-hyun's identity and betrayal, had been reconciled. The world established in the Ki and Sung of Soo-min, the brilliant engineer caught between 2 powerful men, had collided with the twist and settled into a new, stronger, and more honest reality. They hadn't gotten a perfect ending, but they had earned their bittersweet conclusion, finally completing the unwritten blueprint of their lives.